Hello and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. I think we've started now. We're going on our live event. So welcome to our event this afternoon, looking at changing careers, reskilling and retraining through the pandemic. I'm Sam Avanzo-Windet. I am Deputy Director at the Learning and Work Institute, and we're an independent research body in policy and development dedicated to lifelong learning, full employment and inclusion. So what are we doing this afternoon? Well, we're going to hear from a range of fantastic speakers about the retraining challenge facing the UK. So we're going to hear firstly from our head of research here at Learning and Work, Emily. And Emily's going to set out the context for our discussion today. I'm not going to steal her thunder and say how timely it is and why it's so important, but it is. But Emily will set all of that out and also talk a little bit about the work we're doing here at Learning and Work, looking at retraining through our New Futures pilot. We're also going to hear from right across the UK. So we're going to hear from Rayner from Capital City Partnership. We're going to hear from Phil Adams from Devon County Council and Sinead O'Regan from Belfast City Council. We're then going to be joined by the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Shadow Secretary of State for the Future of Work, that's Angela Rayner MP, and she's going to come in with her contribution later on. We're going to have time for a question and answer session at the end. So please think about, some of the points that this event raises for you, some of the questions that you have for our panelists, and we will come to those at the end. Please use a hashtag if you're tweeting about this event online. It's hashtag LWNewFutures. I had to read that, LWNewFutures, if it's there in front of you on the slide. And lastly, just as some scene setting, I can't not mention that this work that we're discussing today about retraining is all possible because of the COVID-19 support fund. That was launched by the UK insurance and long-term savings industry to help support some of the people hardest hit by COVID-19. That fund works in partnership with the Charities Aid Foundation and the network of partners, and includes a strand of work on adult retraining and reskilling, which we are working on with them. So I won't take up any more of the setup because Emily will ably do that for us with her presentation. So Emily, who leads our Learning and Work flagship New Futures project, I'll hand over to you so you can set some of the context and background for our event today. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks very much, Sam. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. As Sam said, my name is Emily Jones and I'm Head of Research at Learning and Work Institute. I'm going to be covering three things today. So some context on the UK's retraining challenge, findings from our adult participation in learning survey, which included questions on whether adults plan to change job or career and the support that they would need to do so. And then finally, to introduce you to our New Futures programme, where we'll be supporting adults whose job has been affected by the pandemic to retrain into a new career. As we know, the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic caused disruption in the labour market. We saw a sharp fall in employment and millions of workers were furloughed. While the economy is now recovering with job vacancies at record levels, employment remains 600,000 lower than before the pandemic, and we've seen a rise in the number of people who are economically inactive. The impact of the pandemic on the labour market has not been evenly spread. Sectors most affected by lockdown and social distancing restrictions, such as hospitality and leisure, were hit hardest, with serious consequences for the people who work in them and for the parts of the country most dependent upon them. In general, the labour market fallout has exacerbated pre-existing inequalities. People on lower incomes, single parents, disabled people, and people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds have seen some of the largest drops in incomes and jobs. The number of people claiming unemployment-related benefits rose 3 times faster in areas that already had the highest unemployment prior to the pandemic, when compared to areas which had the lower levels of unemployment. It's important to note that long-term trends were already reshaping the labour market before the pandemic, including an ageing population and longer working lives, advances in technology and automation changing the way we work, Brexit leading to changes in some sectors and supply chains, and the transition to net zero economy. These trends will continue to affect the jobs available and the skills that the economy needs. Workers will need to access training to ensure that their skills remain current and that they can switch jobs or careers when needed. However, data on investment and participation in learning and training shows that we have instead seen more than a decade of decline. While we might think that changes in the labour market could encourage workers to switch careers, our previous analysis has found that the number of people switching careers has actually fallen since the global financial crisis. The number of sector switches fell after the last recession and only partially recovered before falling again during the pandemic. Despite this, it's still important that workers are supported to move jobs or sectors. The evidence shows that job switching can bring benefits such as improving rates of pay, and those who leave jobs involuntarily can take longer to find a new job, and when they do, they're more likely to find a job that pays less than the one they left. In addition, just because people aren't switching careers doesn't mean that they don't want to. So in this context, we included some questions on career change in our annual Adult Participation in Learning survey. The survey has been running for 25 years and provides unique insights on who is participating in learning and who isn't, based on a representative sample of 5,000 adults across the UK. We published the latest results towards the end of last year, so please do take a look at our report on the website if you haven't already. But just to take a look at the questions on career change. A third of adults told us that they want to change job or career in the next 1 to 2 years, while 17% have said that they're unsure, suggesting there's some level of uncertainty among workers regarding their immediate career plans. Respondents who have experienced a change to their work status since the start of the coronavirus pandemic are more than twice as likely to want to change job or career compared to those who've not experienced any changes. So we can see in this chart that 44% of adults who had a change in their work status wants to change job or career, compared to 20% who had not experienced a change since the start of the pandemic. Half of those who had already changed the type of work that they do or had started a new job say that they want to change job or career. This potentially signals that even where people have moved, this hasn't necessarily been a positive move for them. 69% of adults who say they want to change job or career also say they would need to develop their skills in order to do so, indicating that lacking skills could act as a barrier to people who would like to move. It also suggests that this is a good opportunity to engage people in learning and training. And again, we see that this is more pronounced where respondents had had a change in their work status. 73% of those who had experienced a change since the start of the pandemic believe that they would need to develop their skills in order to change job or career, compared to 58% of those who have not experienced a change. This highlights an opportunity to engage people whose employment has been affected by the pandemic and support them to change their job or career. When asked about the support they would find helpful, adults most commonly told us that they'd like training or learning, followed by financial support. A quarter want financial support towards the cost of learning and training, and 1 in 5 respondents want financial support towards living costs. Respondents also indicated that they would find advice useful to help them choose the right job or career for them, to choose the learning or training for them, or to help them get a new job. 17% of respondents would value coaching and support when they first start a new job. Almost a quarter of adults, so 23%, didn't know what support they would find helpful, pointing to the need for better awareness of careers advice and a more proactive offer. So just to summarise what I've said so far, longer working lives and other changes in the labour market mean that people need to be flexible and may need to change career more often. And our survey indicates that people are interested in doing so. However, the data currently shows that the rate of sector switching is slower than 20 years ago. So how do we address this? With support from the COVID-19 Support Fund, we're running the New Futures programme, aimed at tackling the UK's retraining challenge. As Sam has said, the COVID-19 Support Fund was launched by the UK insurance and long-term savings industry to help support some of the people hardest hit by the pandemic. And we're one of 2 organisations to receive funding to run projects to tackle the adult reskilling crisis. The New Futures programme includes 3 key elements: 5 place-based pilots to test potential solutions to reskilling and career change at a local level, understanding what works through evaluation and analysis, and also sharing what we learn to help change policy and practice. The pilots are based across the UK, in Edinburgh, Belfast, Tees Valley, Devon and Swansea. All of the pilots will support adults whose job has been affected by the pandemic. For example, they may have been made redundant or their job may be at risk. They may now be in insecure or short-term work, or their industry may be changing in a way that means that they need to upskill or reskill. The models tested in each area are tailored to their labour market, so where the job opportunities are and where the gaps are in supporting career change that the pilot can help to address. However, they will all include particular elements: tailored and targeted outreach activity to engage adults who are least likely to participate in training or who are disproportionately affected by the pandemic, high quality careers advice and coaching based on local labour market information and future skills needs, flexible models of training delivery to fit with adults' wider work and family commitments, and funding for community-based charities to build longer-term capacity to provide sustainable reskilling career change support beyond the lifetime of the pilots. We're delighted to be working with partners in each of the local areas to develop the pilots, which will be running from the spring and will end in September 2023. Alongside the pilots, we're undertaking an evaluation to establish an evidence base on what works in supporting reskilling for career change. We also want to use what we learn to influence local and national policy. And we want to think about scalability and transferability to other areas and different contexts. So we're planning to produce resources for practitioners and employers, and we look forward to sharing what we find through events like this throughout the programme. As I said, we've developed the pilots in partnership with local organisations, and the designs are tailored to that local context. I don't want to give too much information at this stage, because we're joined by our partners leading some of the pilots who will be speaking after me. But I just want to give a brief overview of some of the things that we'll be looking at. One of the things that we've done in each of the areas is to look at where the jobs are or will be, which career changers may want to work towards. We've therefore looked at sectors that are growing and also where there are hard to fill vacancies. It's also really important for us to focus on jobs that provide good opportunities in terms of future progression and earning potential. To give some examples of the sectors that the pilots are focusing on, our partner in Edinburgh, so Capital City Partnership, has identified a number of growth sectors in their region, including finance, luxury retail and hospitality, health and social care and construction. Partners in Devon will also be supporting people to take up jobs in construction, as well as jobs in retrofit. Green jobs was a key area of growth highlighted in our initial scoping, although it's not clear how soon those jobs will actually be available. So we're really pleased to be able to test something that connects to the transition to net zero in Devon. Belfast will be focusing on the tech sector, where there are some hard to fill vacancies. And these are just some of the example sectors. As you can see, they vary across the pilot areas, reflecting the differences in their labour market. We'll be working with a range of partners to deliver the pilots. This includes local government, for example, Belfast City Council, Devon County Council and Tees Valley Combined Authority. We'll also be working with local voluntary organisations and charities, and they're likely to play a key role in outreach and engagement as a trusted intermediary in their communities, but they may also provide wider coaching and employment support, for example, in the Tees Valley area, where they will be supporting people to navigate existing programmes that are running to ensure people access the right support for them. In Devon, we'll be working with a housing association to engage with tenants who may want to change job or retrain. As our survey highlighted, it's important that adults engaged in the pilot have access to careers information, advice and guidance to find the right job for them, to find the right training that will help them achieve their goals, and to support them once they start a new job. So we'll be working with a range of organisations who may provide this. It could include National Career Service providers, Work in Wales, but also voluntary and community sector organisations, housing associations and trade unions. Learning and training providers will be critical to the successful delivery of the pilot, as we'll be supporting people to upskill and reskill into new jobs. We have found that in the main, training provision exists, and so we're unlikely to create new provision. However, we will be tackling challenges with outreach and engagement with underrepresented groups and the accessibility or flexibility of provision for people who are in work. In addition, it's really important that people achieve job outcomes, and so our partners are engaging with local employers from the outset, ensuring we have a sound understanding of the jobs available, the requirements for those jobs, and making sure that the training is aligned. Employers may also play a key role in the support we provide to career changers. For example, getting involved in the delivery of training, hosting site visits, or offering guaranteed interviews. Each pilot will be testing different approaches to supporting adults to reskill for career change. And here are just some of the examples of the approaches that we'll be testing. As I said on the last slide, we'll be working closely with local voluntary organisations, charities and housing associations to test community-led outreach and engagement. In the context of a housing association, this could include, for example, running a community hub for tenants to access support with employment, training, health and finance, and also training up residents to act as champions for the pilot. In Tees Valley, we'll be looking at the community and voluntary sector's role in referring people to existing skills and training programmes. And in Wales, we'll be testing the third sector's role in engaging with underrepresented and disadvantaged groups, making sure that they can access careers advice, training provision and employment support. One-to-one advice and coaching is a key feature across the pilots. Just as an example, in Edinburgh, partners will be building upon their existing infrastructure to provide person-centred employment support to adults who need to reskill as a result of the pandemic. So they'll be expanding and adapting their employment support offer. Pilot beneficiaries will get one-to-one caseworker support, as well as 6 months of support following training to secure and maintain a job. Belfast City Council have been working closely with local employers in the tech sector to find a solution to fill vacancies. Employers tend to recruit recent university graduates, even where jobs don't necessarily require degree-level qualifications, and they still have vacancies that they can't fill. So the council is working with them to test whether a work academy model, whereby sector-specific training is delivered intensively, could be adapted for the tech sector and for people in work. I'm really pleased that we're joined here today by 3 people whose organisations will be leading the pilot in their area, and they'll be able to provide more details and context on their local labour markets, as well as their ambitions for their pilot. If you would like any more information about New Futures, or you'd like to work with us on the programme, then please feel free to get in touch. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Emily, for the background, the context. Hopefully that sparked some thoughts for everybody watching around what is that retraining challenge? Why now? What are we seeing through the pandemic? What are we looking at as we go forward? But also thinking about, what can we learn through these pilots? And that's why it's brilliant to be joined here as well by our panelists. And Rayner Hunter is the first that we'll be hearing from today. She's Chief Executive Officer at Capital City Partnership, which is an arm's length company for employability at the City of Edinburgh Council. So Rayner, if I can hand over to you, and you can give us a bit of the context of what's happening in Edinburgh.
Thank you very much, Sam, and welcome everybody to glorious Edinburgh today. It is remarkably dry and sunny today, and it's wonderful again that we can come together through digital formats to have that kind of cross-country unity. So what I'm going to talk about today is about our local employability partnership. As Emily alluded to, we are building on our very mature model of our Joints Up for Jobs network to make better use of our resources, but also to hone in and fill in the gap a little bit more from the effects we've had from the pandemic and what we're now coping with in terms of people who are retraining and reskilling. So if we move on to the next slide. So just to give people a little bit of context, and I did put in a map of Scotland just in case you were under any kind of illusion that Edinburgh is the capital of Scotland. So it's a small country, 5.5 million people. We have 32 local authorities, how we are structured. And as part of that, we have what's called devolved powers, and one of them is around employability. So for us, most of the employability funding goes through local authorities now. And we respond to what's called the Fair Work strategy from the Scottish Government, where we try to ensure all of our services have an effective voice, respect, fulfilment for clients. We make sure the opportunities are good quality one and that there's security of jobs. So in terms of developing this response, we still kept it part of those Fair Work principles. So the mechanism for distributing the Scottish funding is called No One Left Behind. So if I refer to that, and all local authorities have No One Left Behind funding now. So if I refer to that, it's because we're adding value to that structure. Each city also has a city region deal, and we are a key partner in that with Edinburgh and the surrounding regions. And again, they have very much a skills focus. So moving on. So Edinburgh Economy, I think like everybody, we were hugely impacted by the pandemic. Out of a population of just over 500,000 people, we currently, with the latest NOMIS claimant count, we still have 10,000 people, nearly 11,000 people not working and claiming universal credit. And we have a high proportion of those have been in the 16 to 24-year-olds as compared to before. So before the pandemic, in February 2020, we were doing not too bad as an economy in terms of unemployment and people getting jobs. However, post-pandemic, we're still 54% higher in terms of our universal claimants. And we've also seen a significant increase in those who are working being universal claimants and the disruption that's brought. But Edinburgh is a peculiar city in that 25% of our pupils are privately educated. There's a lot of wealth in Edinburgh. We are the economic engine of Scotland. However, at the same time, 1 in 5 of our families are classified as being in poverty. And that has been a persistent figure for a number of years. In simple terms, we're a city of haves and have-nots, and how do we close that gap? So we have a very mature structure in Edinburgh. We have a local employability partnership where we bring all the key stakeholders together. That's Skills Development Scotland, the colleges, universities, our third sector partners, Department of Work and Pensions, and so on and so forth. And we work collectively together to commission and put services in place. So we don't displace anything and we add value where we can. So Skills Development Scotland are our national skills agency, and they have produced very insightful information for us on the impact of COVID-19. And what they have been showing is that we still have some critical growth sectors. But the key thing to hold on to with this is that even though these might look like growth sectors that we're familiar with, especially employability and skills part of it, what the pandemic's done is accelerated how these growth industries were changing. So even though we've put wholesale and retail as a growth industry, it's more around those luxury goods and people having experiences when they're shopping rather than the traditional retail sectors. And there's a different skill set that goes alongside that, much more about customer care and how do we put training and reskilling amongst people impacted by COVID to access these opportunities. So we've identified health and social care, construction, digital and data, which is a huge growth area in Edinburgh. We're actually trying to position ourselves now as the capital of digital and data for Europe, wholesale and retail and finance. It's also within our wider regional framework, which Edinburgh heads up, that we have 250,000 odd opportunities will come up because of replacement demand. So that just shows you how quickly the workforce is changing, either they're retiring or changing jobs. There's a lot of churn going on. So looking forward, for the next slide. When this opportunity came up and you know, whenever any new opportunity comes, you sit and think, right, we don't want to duplicate, we don't want to displace, what is it that we need to do? And so from our own analysis, and I've put on the right, that's the kind of mapping of all of the offers that we contract, manage and have in place in Edinburgh. It is huge, very much targeted at client groups with protected characteristics, also engaging with employers. So we wanted to make sure what this did was tap into something quite unique. And what we found was that there was a real need for up-to-date careers advice and also retraining and the skills that are required. And we very much wanted to harness this as well to employer engagement. So for example, HMRC, for example, have moved into Edinburgh and created a whole range of jobs. We want to work with employers like that to say, what are the skill sets you're needing so we can put training on to help people to then be able to transfer into the finance sector. So what we came up with in the Edinburgh New Futures model, we think we're going to have to do a lot of outreach, getting into those hardest to help communities. Most of the work that we commission that you can see on the right-hand side is delivered by our third sector partners, so we're very well bedded in there. But we're also expecting that there'll be a level of self-management and people will want to access a website, a portal to do that. So we're investing in a new engagement portal so that workers and support workers and clients can navigate to that. We want to engage with 600 people, and that's from our own analysis of how many people have been reaching out for support. Some of them will be registered to other areas within our pipeline, that diagram on the right, because they might need something very specialist or they might not be ready for this opportunity. But we're looking at 400 of those engagements having a detailed action plan to progress through the opportunity. So we'll have 250 one-to-one career advice sessions. We'll also have 250 accredited training places that we're going to offer. And we have 9 different lots within that training place. That training will go from maybe 1 to 2 weeks training. It could go up to 4 months training that you complete half a day a week while you're still working to get yourself the qualifications to retrain. We're very much having a flexible approach to that. From this, we're anticipating 200 job outcomes, and also we want to make sure that those are sustained and we have 200 in-work support places going forward. One of the things that's attracted us to this project is that it is a pilot and testing this out. So while we put this framework of what we want to achieve together, we're very interested in the learning. So if we go into the next and last slide. This has been so helpful for us as a project, and we've really appreciated working with L&W on creating a theory of change. because this isn't just about responding to the pandemic and trying to get people to reskill and retrain. It's about the learning. It's about how is this going to inform our future funding? How are we going to keep people having the capacity to be innovative and accelerators? So the theory of change is something we're going to monitor very closely and make adjustments to, and very much embed and inform that back into our good practice going forward. So in a nutshell, that's where we are in Edinburgh and the surrounding regions, and we are very much looking forward to getting this project up and running and making a difference. And thank you for the opportunity for speaking today.
Fantastic, thank you, Rayner. That's brilliant to go into a bit more detail. I've certainly got questions myself. I'm sure I'm keen to ask, but hopefully that sparked lots of interest from others as well, going into the how are we going to do it and what it's going to look like in Edinburgh. But now we're going to be turning to Devon. So Phil Adams, who's joining us, is lead for employment skills and adult learning activity at Devon County Council. And Phil, I know you've been busy on all the levelling up things today, but thank you for taking the time to talk to us about the retraining challenge stuff too. So over to you.
Thanks, Sam. And yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm going to talk about where we are in Devon, and unsurprisingly, it's even though we're at the other end of the UK, it's a very similar picture actually what we've just heard, and some of those themes that Emily's just taken us through. I actually did have some slides, but I'm aware that I can't actually get them up on screen. So I'll talk you through where we are. I mean, Devon as an area, it's a very similar sort of approach and a very similar picture to some of the things that we've already heard. Traditionally, we're a high activity, low output area. We're a strange area in that we're asymmetric. We've got Exeter that sits in the centre that underpins our knowledge economy. And then we're surrounded by, the beautiful landscape of Dartmoor, Exmoor and the coast. But unfortunately, that rurality and that distance from some of our core areas means that we've got extremes in terms of performance. This was always the case, and we've had it. To give you a feel, Exeter's gross value added per head is around 41,000. Torridge, which is 40 miles away, is 14,000. So it can be that stark across our areas. And that was the challenge we had before COVID, before Brexit, before some of the things that have happened. COVID was a particular issue for us. We've had a particularly acute period around COVID where our core sectors, tourism, hospitality, retail, took a particularly significant hit. To give you a feel, unemployment quadrupled pretty much overnight across most of our districts, with a particular hard impact on those rural and coastal areas, which were the most vulnerable. Looking at our geography, the south of our area, South Devon, around the Torbay area that we neighbour, and looking at northern Devon, our sort of coastal strip, areas which traditionally have always been in the bottom 20%, were hit almost with 50 to 60% unemployment in some towns and areas. So very dramatic, big issue for us, big impacts in those first few months. The issue for us is that recovery has been equally dramatic. We've seen unemployment over half over the last 6 months. We've seen areas which were very heavily impacted by COVID bounce back, and we're seeing some real success stories in terms of Exeter, in terms of parts of northern Devon, and in terms of other areas in the patch. The challenge that we're now dealing with is that it's an asymmetric recovery. And we're seeing many of the trends that Emily talked about in her previous evidence piece. Overall, we've lost about 25,000 people out of a working age population of around 450,000. That's about 5 to 6%. They've gone. They are no longer economically active for all sorts of reasons: retirement, Brexit, other causes, just simply after COVID deciding not to work anymore. And we're finding that there's a particular local choice around not working. We're seeing around 15% fewer people who are self-employed. So our self-employed numbers have plummeted as well, which is a huge factor. In many cases, it was older workers in the southwest that just decided not to go back to work. We're also seeing more people going to PAYE, and we've seen a shift from self-employment into full-time permanent payrolled work. That is creating a culture change across the entire piece. So alongside many of the traits that Rayner and Emily have touched on already, we're seeing in Devon this intergenerational shift that we've not seen previously. That's affecting other things as well. It's affecting our UC register. So we're still seeing relatively high unemployment for our area. Traditionally, it's around 1.5%. We're running at about 3% at the moment. It doesn't sound a lot, but it is a big cultural shift for us. But what we are seeing in that 3% is that the shift has been between the short-term unemployed and the long-term unemployed. Previously, we ran at about 50-50. At the moment, we're running probably 20% short-term unemployed, 80% of the register, about 9,500 individuals, long-term unemployed over a year. And that's a huge cultural shift and shift in terms of resources for us. The labour market's been really interesting as well, and really quickly. Yesterday, we had around 33,000 live jobs in Devon. That compares to about 12,000 if you looked at it in 2019. So we've seen 3 times a day more job adverts than that. And as I said, we've only got 12,000 individuals on UC. So there's about 3 jobs to every 1 individual in the patch. There is some duplication there. We're working through those figures, but it's really dramatic about the levels of demand we're seeing. That's really asymmetric, though. A lot of it is in Exeter, a lot of it's in those prosperous areas. What we're not seeing is the recovery in some of our coastal, rural, and sort of South Devon market towns. The numbers are really limited in terms of where the employment sits, and getting around the county and that accessibility is a huge challenge. So unless the jobs exist in your locality, you cannot access them. We also see, and this is something that others have talked about, a labour market that's accelerated 10 years overnight. We're seeing engineering, teaching, programme management, finance, areas which traditionally have been amongst our strongest, construction, where retirement that was planned for 2027, 29 has happened this year. And we're seeing older workers, which is a big issue for us in the Southwest, retiring at a point which we never anticipated. We're having to move plans, employers are having to move plans forward, and it's leaving huge gaps in terms of our labour market locally and in terms of some of our sector profile. So that's kind of where we are as Devon. The New Futures project gives us an opportunity, though, to look and be innovative around how we approach dealing with some of these new challenges, and post-COVID dealing with some of those challenges about the labour market, but also around some of our claimants and residents. And what we've decided to do, and what we're focusing on through this, is taking a look at one individual sector. So in a similar model to Edinburgh, we are looking at that outreach, that advice, that guidance piece, but we're looking at it around the retrofit and construction piece. We've got a specific set of challenges, as has everybody else, around retrofit and housing. We know that there's a massive demand. We know there's a massive change to come. We know it's about £100 billion across the entire country by 2050 to reach zero carbon. But we know that we're going to need the people in the construction sector and across wider trades to do it. The challenge is, post-COVID, a lot of those individuals who are in the trades or who are in those markets have started to retire at a faster rate. We're seeing sectors becoming desperate for construction personnel and for individuals to drive that retrofit and change agenda forward, just at the moment where the labour market is at its tightest. So finding people from elsewhere in the country and from outside the UK is not an option. So how can we help with that? And what we're looking to do here is to provide a fix, to bring those two groups together, and working with one of our housing associations, take forward a new innovative approach. So our project. We're taking a pilot project forward with Teen Housing, who's one of our 6 or 7 main housing associations over in Devon, with the National Careers Service around some of the advice and guidance piece, and with Learn Devon, who's our community learning organisation, and basically creating a pathway and an advice service for tenants, but also for the wider community in Teignbridge, which is one of our most vulnerable areas, if you know Devon, to move people towards careers in that retrofit and construction sector. We've got an existing demand for about 1,500 to 2,000 jobs across the wider area, either within pure construction or particularly within retrofit. And we know that over the next few years, that demand is going to accelerate, as is progression opportunities. What we've got at the moment with a housing association is around 12,000 to 15,000 tenants and around 3,000 properties that are going to be looking for that staff. And actually, Teen itself is looking for 50 individuals just off the bat. What we've got here is an opportunity through advice, tailored advice and guidance, but also through bringing that outreach piece that Emily spoke about into a single place, and through working with community areas, through work clubs, through community groups, through some of those secondary contact areas, to move tenants in an intelligent way towards some of these pathways. We've got a fully paid for training offer that's on offer at the moment due to some other project money we've got. We've got alternative offers around construction, and we've got employers desperate to find people. But the challenge that we've had so far is linking together that intelligent design of the careers advice and guidance piece and the wider appeal of some of those jobs, some of which are high tax, high value occupations, if we can just do the match. So the pilot's around working with 1,600, initially doing careers advice and guidance, working with tenants, working with the housing association, working with wider community groups to bring people forward, work with them around construction if it's of interest, but it doesn't have to be. And for those that aren't, we've got other referral routes in a very similar way to the organogram that was shown in Edinburgh. We then are going to take about 800 into some enhanced SEAG facilities and opportunities and work with them around where they want to go. But where we're trying to get to is that we've got around 250 live opportunities where individuals that are already interested in the construction sector, we have jobs and training opportunities fully funded, ready to go. And what we're trying to do here is accelerate our retrofit process, our retrofit capacity across the sector to allow us to start to meet that zero carbon opportunity over the next few years. I mean, in practice, it's going to be wobbly. There's going to be issues. There's going to be things that we learn as we go through. And as others have talked about, that theory of change is going to be critical, understanding some of those learning points, understanding those pivot points and the real issues around where's the capacity, where's the targeting, how do we best do this? But if we get it right, there's a huge opportunity for us as Devon. I mean, if nothing else, we provide a new pathway for individuals into work, into better paid, higher skilled, future ready jobs that are going to be there for the next 60 to 100 years. The sector's huge. I mean, there's a massive national opportunity around this. And if we can move people into the sector, we feel there's a real opportunity to improve life chances. But it goes beyond that. It accelerates the sector. It allows it to start to do some of the things that it's got to do and that it's got to invest in. It starts to move forward some of the employment and the green skills agenda from a promise of tomorrow into something that we can actually start to realise today. And I think the bigger thing for us is it creates a pathway that we can start to translate into other associations, into other areas, and hopefully something that we can use as a learning point about how you can reskill and work with community members to really take advantage of that green opportunity, something that we talk about a lot, but we've never been able to fully demonstrate. So that in the nutshell is the pilot. That's what we're doing. I mean, in many ways, we share all the same issues and all the same opportunities as other areas. But I think what we're trying to do here is focusing very tightly on one specific area and then run with it where we can. And that was what I was going to say as an intro, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Phil. That's brilliant. And really good to sort of get into the nitty-gritty of how this could look at those green opportunities, green skills agenda, and actually start making them tangible in Devon, and what we could all learn from that. Brilliant. So last but not least on our panel from the pilots is Sinead O'Regan, Employability and Skills Manager for the Economic Development Unit at Belfast City Council. Really pleased that you could be with us as well, Sinead, to give us your perspective from what you're doing in Belfast. So I shall hand over to you.
Thank you very much. And I think there's a presentation going up, and it's always difficult when you're the last one up, because literally, and I was really listening to Phil and Rona. I know offline we've been speaking to each other, but yes, so everything that they're doing, we're doing too. So if you just move on to the first slide, and I'll just take you through, I suppose, where we are in terms of Belfast City Council, but also certainly in Belfast and the strategic context, what sectors we're working in, and then really getting into the Learn and Work Institute and the work we're doing with them. And we're really keen, I suppose, to work through New Futures, not only to deliver something that's high risk but high reward, but also being able to engage with those other cities that are also within the pilot phase. So as I know that Rona and Phil have kind of talked about the issues, in some ways structural issues are kind of persistent across the UK. So in Belfast there is a very persistent skills mismatch, and 14% of the population have no qualifications at all. We also have a quirk that we have much higher levels of long-term unemployment than other regions within the UK. And among the highest levels of economic inactivity. And in some ways, as a result of the conflict in Northern Ireland, economic inactivity rates particularly in Belfast, are very, very high. They're 31% across the city, and it's not evenly spread. So there is a really big geospatial imbalance within the city in terms of opportunities, jobs and income within. So areas of multiple deprivation are very much concentrated within north and west of the city. There has been poor planning and coordination of services across the city. So there's lots and lots of employability and skills interventions and provision, but they're not necessarily joined up with each other. So if you can go on to the next slide. And I suppose, so Northern Ireland is quite different from the rest of the UK in terms of its local authorities don't have the statutory responsibility that other local authorities have in Great Britain. So we don't have, for example, responsibility for social care housing. We don't have responsibility for employability and skills, but actually that puts us in a fairly unique position because we're a neutral broker in this space. So in terms of the strategic context for us, the Belfast Agenda is the community plan for Belfast and really drives the work that we do. We also have an Innovation and Inclusive Growth Commission, and we have an inclusive growth strategy within council, and it very much touches on all of the kind of the target groups and the drive that we have as a city towards inclusive growth. So, and we're fairly serious about it. So how do we actually resolve in-work poverty? How do we actually move people from economic inactivity to really the best paid jobs that they possibly can? It's also a context where there's a new skills strategy for Northern Ireland. One of the biggest changes, and it's very, very recent, is our Belfast Labour Market Partnership that we convene as a local authority. And it's the main government departments responsible for employability and skills are fully resourcing it. So we're hoping that that will join up all of the dots. So I thought it was important to kind of give the context and the background of where New Future sits. So if I can go on to the next slide, through the Labour Market Partnership, I suppose as a city, we've looked at our COVID recovery priorities. So that is quickly back to work, increasing opportunities, no one left behind, and catching up. And that's very much about looking at, as much as the quickly back to work is around those people who have been directly impacted by COVID, and it's very important for us to support those people into work and the best jobs that they can. It's also, we need to acknowledge as a city that those who were far back already have actually been pushed even further back. In the labour market, we do have disadvantaged people and disadvantaged communities within Belfast, and I suppose improving our skills landscape is very, very important to us. So, and in terms of the next slide, please, in terms of the sectors that we're looking at, I know that the other speakers have kind of mentioned this. So we are very active across logistics. So I know people will know that there aren't enough hauliers out there. So we have kind of trained up, in the process of training up about 250 people to be lorry drivers at the minute. So we're very active with our anchor institutions in health and social care, retrofit and construction. But specifically for the new futures, we've really looked at the tech sector. So really tech and professional services. If you can have the next slide, please. And I suppose for us in the tech sector, so it's a brand new sector for us to work in. There's a real challenge that we have in terms of those kind of employers being very snobbish in many ways about wanting to have people with degrees to work there. But the reality is that the demand is going to dry up fairly soon, and they're just not going to get the supply. So there's some sectors in Belfast, particularly around cybersecurity, that has massive growth. So the growth potential within it is massive. Our challenge is that people who don't have the qualifications that are normally expected are going to be left behind. And it's why we're really, really keen to work through New Futures, look at a brand new sector to be able to pick apart. So we think we're doing something quite good. But all of our design assumptions, we want someone to have a critical eye on it and think, do you know what, why did you do that way? Or maybe it's better to do it that way, so that we can kind of share the learning that we get from that across the UK. So some of our design assumptions we have delivered over the last 5 years, employment academies to kind of as a finishing school to get people into work. So they are always employer driven. So there's always real jobs at the end of it. We do always challenge the philosophy with employers that qualifications are actually the only barometer of suitability for a job. We also actively engage with the full range of provision across the city. So in Belfast, with a population of 350,000, you have 64 employability and skills providers in the city. So they don't all necessarily talk to each other, and it's quite a competitive environment, but they will all talk to us, and we are very much seen as a neutral broker in that space. We also want to test out, while treating people as unique individuals, so not kind of segregating people into target audiences, how can we then engage people on an outreach basis that we are actually specifically targeting specific groups? So so that's fairly new for us. So, so for example, we obviously want to target people through new features have been kind of impacted, but we also want to look at, what about people who are experiencing in-work poverty, and what about women, or what about young people? So we're trying to kind of look at, well, is there a different way that we can specifically target? We want to test out our pre-screening, matching and delivery, and I suppose, we want to test out, does this actually attract non-traditional applicants? Like, does it actually give those employers who we are actively asking to reduce their qualifications criteria and experience, does that actually increase their diversity within the workforce? And we do provide quite intensive aftercare. So we want to look at, through new features, is that critical to the stickability and the resilience of people in their new jobs? So if we can have the next slide, please. This is just a bit of an overview of the model that we have across all of our employment academies. So we tend to kind of have a quick defined model, but obviously in the tech sector, it's, if you really need a job within haulage, it's a fairly simple process for us. It's a license, and that does take a number of months, but we're in the process of co-designing with the employers. What will it take someone who has no experience and no qualifications, but has the aptitude? What will it take to get those people skilled up for those jobs within tech? So we're literally bang in the middle of the process of agreeing the number of roles for those employers. What skill levels do they need? And then we're about to go out live with throwing our net out. We are hoping, I suppose, in terms of that it will provide the learning so that we can scale up fairly quickly. And I suppose we're in the position now with those employers that we have to build a reputation with them. So we're asking them to very much go out on a limb in terms of, something that's not necessarily comfortable for them. But the reality is, it's about getting them good employees if they just change their focus to a different target group. So if I can have the next slide. So in terms of the kind of supply side simulation, it is about us kind of reaching out to those without the qualifications or experience. We do involve employers throughout the entire process. So we have a roadshow, for example, next week that includes a range of opportunities we have open at the minute for employment academies, from fibre splicing through to construction or haulage. So, tech is one of those new sectors that we're reaching out. So we bring employers to that and are very much prepping stakeholders all of this week and into next week about those opportunities coming up. So, while people are on all of our interventions, if they have any remaining barriers, we do look to remove them so that they can continue on our interventions. So, and I suppose it's matching in terms of demand, everything we do, and it's, we think it's fairly, it's a bit of a no-brainer for us, but everything we do is about demand. So how do we, and we are from the Economic Development Unit in Belfast City Council, so it is as important to us. Inclusive growth and business growth are equally important to us in terms of engaging with companies. And I'll kind of just end on this. It is really, really important that they commit to inclusion, that it's not just their corporate social responsibility, that ultimately it's getting really good, sustainable employees who can grow their businesses. So I'll end there. It was literally just a flavour. And if anyone has any queries or questions, just ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sinead. Some different takes and some different focuses there in Belfast, and focus on diversity and the non-usual sort of candidates. I think that's really important and does run through the pilots. But it's interesting in how each area is approaching that. So we do have a question to you already that Emily, I just wanted to pose to you very quickly before we're joined by Angela Rayner. It's actually from Dominic Atkinson from Stay Nimble. And he says that, they've been looking at this and been doing work around this for a number of years, especially working with the community partners and housing associations. Just wondered if we can give a little bit of thought to, how others who are joining us this afternoon might be able to share those insights, how flexible is our sort of plans over the next couple of years, and how we can build some of that in. Do you mind if we go to you, Emily?
Yeah, sure, thanks. And thank you for the question. We are really interested to hear from anyone who has insights, anything that can help us to make these pilots a success. So I think the email address for the project has been shared, so that's newfuturesatlearningandwork.org.uk. We'd love to have a conversation with you. We are still finalising the designs of the pilots, and so it's not too late for us to make adaptations where that's sensible. Just to say that we are also bringing the pilots together, the pilot lead organisations together as part of a pilots implementation group to share learning and share lessons. And then we'll also be thinking about how we share that more widely with other local areas and also through events like this.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, and it would be, actually when we designed these pilots, it was in the middle of the pandemic, wasn't it, Emily? Actually the labour market looks quite different now to what we had thought when we first proposed, and we've had to build that flexibility in from the start. So the flexibility both around what we're going to be looking at, but then how others can build in as well. Those insights are massively welcomed. We know there will be lots of activity in different parts of the UK doing different parts of this, and we're really keen to learn from what everybody's doing, what you can send to us, what you can tell us, what you want to join us sort of with this next couple of years of work that we're doing. We've got another question, which is, when will the pilots, I don't know who sent this one in, but when will the pilots end? Will there be an evaluation event to share the learning? I suppose I could answer that one, but I'm going to come over to you, Emily, for that.
So the pilots themselves will be running from this spring, and they will complete in September 2023. So we've got 18 months worth of piloting. We will be evaluating from day one. So as Rayner showed, we are developing theory of change, changes with each of the pilot areas, and we will be evaluating and sharing that learning as we go. So there will be a final evaluation report, but actually we want to be able to share those insights and those lessons as we go, because the end of 2023 seems quite a long time away at the moment.
It is, and there's a lot that we've already learned on our journey to get to this point, as you can imagine, and things that we're happy to share. But as we go through, we'll be doing, as Emily said, the interim evaluation report, but we'll also be doing our policy papers on things like green skills. So we will endeavour to put on more events like this, and which we're now happily joined by Angela Rayner MP. Angela, lovely to see you there. Thanks so much for joining us on this incredibly busy afternoon. I know in Parliament, lots going on in politics at the moment, to be sure. So it's, particularly with your hat of the shadow Future of Work Secretary and thinking about retraining in the UK, really pleased to have you join us. I'll pass over to you to say some comments to feed into this debate.
Well, thank you so much to you and to the Learning at Work Institute for holding this panel event and raising the issue of reskilling and retraining. And it's great to be here, and I hope you've had a good session so far. And although my diary is busy, there is nothing more important to me than how we can reskill and support people to have prosperity throughout their lives and the enrichment and the value of education. Now, I know all too well the importance of learning new skills later in life, because I think it's well documented now that I didn't really love my education when I was younger. I wasn't going to do well at school because of external factors, not my teachers, may I add. And that wasn't my interest at 14. I had a lot more going on in life, but I did need a hand in later life as a care worker, and I needed training and support and encouragement to grow in a career that I absolutely loved. And I found my love of education in higher education and adult skills when I went back as an adult after a gap. And after that, I needed new training to be brilliant and effective as a trade union rep. And I learned that, you know, education can be a fun thing. And I learned that as a full-time official, and it really helped me represent my members. And I had obviously becoming an MP and then upskilling to be deputy leader. It's fair to say that I value vocational training very much, and I've learned a lot over the years. And it's so important that people see lifelong learning as crucial as part of what we do in our daily lives. So I hope I'm living proof that what you do to make the case for reskilling and retraining is vital. Now, in terms of, as you say, the future of work and my particular shadow role in taking that forward, it is great to hear about the new futures pilots, which are an important part of tackling this challenge. The pandemic has accelerated the need for reskilling, in my view, for workers being able to adapt their skills and for new jobs and new technologies and changes that are happening within the labour market. And we do need to take this seriously, or we risk leaving millions of workers without the skills that they need to best contribute to our society and look after their families. And of course, we now have this gap growing inequality that has been exacerbated. And I worry about those children that are going through education now and the opportunities that they will need, like I did, because of the challenges they faced in terms of skilling into the future. Now, I know how important this is, and it's why my role as Shadow Secretary of State for the Future of Work, I'm looking to make a real difference to the plight of working people. I make no apologies for that. People go to work to live, they don't live for work, and it's important that that emphasis is on the fact that people can have good and fulfilling and well-paid and well-skilled jobs into their future and don't feel written off at any age. And of course, reskilling is very important to that. We know that a third of people who want to move jobs don't feel that they have the skills to do so. And that's not good enough, quite frankly. And we must make it accessible for them to change their lives as they see fit. I know we need radical change to tackle the challenges in our country's economy. 0-hour contracts, for example, families juggling jobs and childcare, declining pay, insecure work, lack of prospects for young people, and lack of quality jobs outside big cities. These are big challenges that we have at the moment, and we need to see big changes to pay, security, equality in the workplace. And we need to see workers have more power to come together and demand better terms and conditions and pay and training. Now, for our country to prosper, we need the skills in our workers that allow us to move forward into the future. You know, back in the day, people used to start work at 16 and, you know, are an apprentice or go to university, and then they'd likely have the same career. for the rest throughout of their working lives. That is not the future of work for this country, and people are going to have to be adaptable. And therefore, I believe the economy, the skills economy, and employers need to be adaptable as well and flexible, and see lifelong learning as something that should be integrated into our culture. We want to make sure that everyone in the UK can prosper, to get on with their lives and have a good job and an enjoyable life. And that sounds like, okay, everyone would agree with that. But so often at the moment, that's not the situation that many people face. And we need to be supporting people to reskill and retrain into jobs that provide security, dignity, and a proper wage. Now, being able to be in a job that is appropriate and makes you feel pride is vital to that. You know, you have to feel like what you're doing is worthwhile and that you've got the skills and the ability to do it. And that, for me, one of the big challenges that I think we face as an economy is we don't put well-being at the heart of it. If you look at what the Welsh Labour government have done, it's really inspirational to see how they're using the levers of government to skill up people and to ensure that well-being is at the heart of their economy and everything that they do. And, you know, people should have that pride and should have that ability to feel safe and secure in their workplace. And that is why we launched the Green Paper on the New Deal for Working People. And, you know, because of your new future pilots, that makes it for us to see that good jobs can be across the United Kingdom, to see more training away from London, which I think is crucial. And we need to understand local labour markets to be able to give people the right skills. Now, that is, for me, true levelling up. You know, the government can shout levelling up, but real levelling up for me comes from giving people, wherever they live, the chances they need to get on with their lives. And far too often for many parts of the UK, I'm a grandma myself, grandparents see their children have to move out of their area, and people have to move out of the area that they grew up in just to get themselves skilled employment. And we can't continue to have that situation. It isn't complicated, in my view. It doesn't need a whole white paper. It needs simple solutions that plenty of brilliant organisations, including yourself, can tell the government all about. So I can't wait for this. Inequality, you know, is getting worse in this country. We need reskilling taken seriously now. And you will always have a friend in me, even though I'm no longer the Shadow Secretary of State for Education. Many of you who knew me in that role that I took on for many years, who developed the National Education Service programme, will know that my fond memory of tertiary education, adult education and lifelong learning is embedded in my values as a politician, and I take forward into my role as Deputy Leader and of the Future of Work Shadow Secretary of State. So I look forward to working with you in the future. And on my closing remarks, I'd just like to say thank you so much for the work that you do to inspire people into education, to infect our workplace and our economy with that love of learning, which will only make us prosper even more, and for the work that you do every single day. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Angela. I've never been more proud of infecting people in my life, but infecting people with that love of learning is absolutely right, what we try and do here at Learning and Work, and this is all part of that agenda. Thank you, Angela. I know you talked about levelling up as well, and I know that there's a lot going on this afternoon. They've literally just published it, finally, the paper, so I know that you have to jump off now, but thank you very much for joining us and for giving your contribution, and we'll keep you informed of the pilots and the work that we're doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Thanks, and you too. Great. So we're going to move on to our question and answer section of the event now. We've got a little bit of time now to hear from everybody who's been listening in, thinking, oh, we're doing a bit of this, or actually, have you thought about X, or what are you doing about Y? So if everybody can put their cameras on from the panel, and Emily as well, and we can see all your lovely faces. That's brilliant. I've got a question here already from Dahlia, which it would be great to have your thoughts on from all of you. So the question is, what elements are in your pilots to address how people with disabilities in particular, but other challenges as well, can flex to meet the skills gaps that you're trying to address in your pilot area? So I hope that's clear about people with disabilities and challenges, how they can be part of this to meet those local skills gaps. Now, Rayner, if I can come to you first, you've put your hand up already. That is enthusiasm to answer this question.
There's enthusiasm for you.
But I will come to each in turn, but Rayner, if you wanted to go first.
Yeah, like a lot of prioritised groups, we very much have a tailored service for people with a disability. We have a service called All in Edinburgh, which is a third sector partnership consortium. We achieve the highest outcomes in Scotland from that service. So part of what we're doing is wrapping around and making better value from services already in place. And we have in Scotland what's called the supported employment model, which is very much about getting people into jobs and then working with them to upskill and progress in that. So we've got those principles already bedded in. And it's very much going back to that again of, disability is a very broad term. So it's going back to that personalised individual of what is it you want to achieve and how can we help get you there for that part of it. So in terms of lots of different prioritised groups, but to answer that particular question, that is deeply, deeply embedded in terms of the culture of our local employability partnership and what we do. And if I do say so myself, we do it very, very well. To give you like a tiny example, we've done pilot projects with JP Morgan funding before about maybe somebody who's on autistic spectrum. How do you put digital training in for people to become coders, for example, if they show a certain attraction to certain sectors? Again, it's working with the skills people have and the opportunities and turning that around.
Lots of focus there in Edinburgh, clearly. Sinead, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you. So you see me nodding my head furiously at Rona. I'm a nodder when they agree with something. So yeah, I suppose what we do is, and I know I kind of mentioned it within my presentation. So what we do is engage those organisations who work directly with a whole range of kind of target groups that we may have. Could be women, older workers, young people, disabilities. So we specifically engage within regionally. We have a regional structure for all disability organisations. And we engage very heavily with them, saying, you need to design this with us, or what are the challenges? And it's very simple. And it was interesting when Angela Rayner said, like, none of this is complicated. You know, we go out and speak to organisations. So, like, literally yesterday, a number of my colleagues spoke to Orchardville Society, who work with people with disabilities. And we kind of ask them to specifically challenge us. Now, they do. But they're like, I have a group of people and this is what their specific need is. If there's any way that we can remove that barrier for them. So it could be negotiating with the employer to do a work trial as opposed to an interview. But unless we know what those challenges are, we can't do anything about them. And because we have a brief for business growth as well, we can talk to employers in their language about being able to really overcome those challenges and use our powers, and really in that way, any issue that someone has when they're, I suppose, going through our process, it could be a sign language interpret, whatever it is, childcare, whatever it is, if it's a barrier, we'll remove it for them if it's within our power to do so. So yeah, that's just a bit of a flavour.
So it's engaging, it's thinking about the specifics and the details and how you can work to quickly remove them. Phil, did you have anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, we're in a very similar place over in Devon. So we've got a disability partnership. We're working very closely with the Restart scheme, actually, around those tailored approaches that DWP is rolling out. And we've done some specific pilot work, actually, around disability and moving individuals who are harder to reach within various subgroups, whether skeletal, mental health, a few other areas, into work. And we've learned some lessons from that. In Teambridge in particular, we've done some pilot work actually around exactly this, because it is the hardest group to reach in terms of some of the UC intense side. And what we're looking to do here is bring that employer-led approach to it. We've got a number of employers, particularly in construction, actually, because when you say disability, you think a certain picture, but actually disability is far wider, and there's a number of different groups that you can bring into other sectors. And what we found previously is there's a really good entry sector for certain groups around finding work and value. So yeah, I mean, we're in a very similar place. It sounds like we all use the same tactics and all use the same strategies. It's just that geographic difference a little bit.
Yeah, and the groups that you talk to and how you, I mean, your specific focus with the Housing Association, as you say, and thinking about the Restart scheme and other areas to tackle any of the barriers. Fantastic, good. Now there's another question, a quite different tack this time, which is about level 2 qualifications, which is a question from Ruth Spellman. Wanted to know what your opinions are on whether English, Maths and Digital sort of level 2 qualifications should be a priority for underpinning sustainable jobs for the future. So should people be getting to that level for those sustainable jobs into the future? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Phil, you've got your hand up. Was that a new hand?
Yeah, no, it is a new hand.
Oh, good.
So as head of adult education, I'm probably biased on this particular issue because I'm responsible for level 2 delivery across Devon. I mean, it is important. And the more that we work with employers, the more important it gets. We know that digital literacy and numeracy piece is a huge piece of the recruitment challenge. And actually getting people confident in their skills and the ability to move into work has been a huge part of our preparing people for work. I mean, we also find working with the community, it's part of giving them the confidence to go and do it. It's part of their self-fulfilling piece. And actually, whilst it's sometimes seen as a barrier to access, and there are roles where it absolutely is, and we work on those, it's something which is essential. It's something that is almost a norm now amongst certain employers. And actually, if that's the only step you're going to take, if we can help you to get there, then we will. Yeah.
So that's built in. Rona, did you have anything to add on this one? Then I'll come to you, Sinead.
I mean, we've got a slightly different in terms of qualification side of it. It's a difficult one because time and again, especially with young people, where we looked at apprenticeship programs and we worked with employers and they ask for, in Scotland, like 3 hires in certain subject areas. And you're like, they don't need the 3 hires. We worked with employers who come up with, one employer's like, we've got 40 questions and 10 of them are killer questions. So if you don't get them right, that means you're out of the process. We're like, why would you want to do that when you're trying to recruit people and you're desperate to recruit? That's not going to help anybody. Yes, some fundamental understanding in terms of like literacy and numeracy is important and digital, but even more important to me is like, can the person actually do a job and you can work with them, and quite often work with them when they're in the job as well. And you know, this comes into like presentation skills, interview skills. Why are you putting people through these horrible interviews to punish them when you want them to do a job and that interview's got nothing to do with the skills they need to do? We need to get smarter and to actually, do you know what, you might not be academic, you don't have to be, you can do the job and we can help you get to that.
Yeah, and that's similar to Sinead, that's similar to your approach too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so it's a complicated one. So my background, so I used to be a teacher many years ago. I was the first member of my entire family to go to university, but yeah, I haven't taught in 25 years. But lifelong learning and community education is very important to me personally, right? So what I'm about to say, you need to put that in context. In terms of the work that I do, and it's exactly the same as Rona said, only I'm going to say it in a different way. We only train people to the extent to which the employer requires it. So if it's a license they need, if it's a blah, blah, blah. So there's a difference in just having qualifications and just asking a level 2 or just needing hours or just that employer. So from an economic, socio-economic perspective, it is about, you know, it is about the vocational relevance of it as opposed to, and I'm saying that with a degree in philosophy, right? But, and because I loved education, but I didn't do it to directly get a job. So I did it for a love of education. So that's why I'm saying it's fairly complicated for me. I totally believe in it. But in terms of the work we do, so I think the way I think about it is we're making an investment in a person to be able to get a job with that employer. So, and we push the envelope with employers to say, why do you need this? Why do you need GCSE? Do you need that? So we spend a lot of time pushing that envelope. And then once people get into work, and so yeah, people can develop a joy of learning, but it's just not the world we currently live in the work I do. I hope that explains it.
Yeah, thanks, Sinead. we've got two more questions that come in from very different angles. One's very practical and the other is very policy focused. So I'm going to take the practical first, back to all of you in the pilots. It's Peter Lavender, who's interested in when you're talking about providers, who's actually delivering the teaching or who's actually delivering the support in your minds. And I know in all the different pilots, you'll be thinking slightly different models. So I wonder if I can come to you first, Sinead, then Rona, then Phil, if you can sort of talk about the who of who might be doing this.
Okay, so we have an employment framework and a DPS. It sits kind of within that to be able to deliver what we have, and it provides us with an agility to be able to move quickly and to get the right suppliers in to be able to do it. So, and we procure mostly on our entire model, and that's anywhere from careers guidance, employability support through to vocational training. So we want kind of industry specialists. So I don't know if it's JavaScript or whatever it is that people kind of want. So industry kind of specialists deliver that, and the aftercare support. So, and there, in some ways, you know, I suppose what we want is organizations to work in partnership with each other. So a really good training provider is not necessarily going to be able to provide the careers guidance. So we do a lot of pre-market engagement, certainly locally, to ensure that organizations know what we expect and are able to respond to our procurement. So, and that it's fine for us. I prefer if organizations, you know, don't feel they have to do end to end, that they can be specialists and go into clump into partnership with each other.
Yeah, you were talking about that competitive sort of provider base. Rona, in Edinburgh.
Similar to Sinead. I think me and Sinead have got a whole kind of similarity thing going on with that. Yes, we're putting core staff in place, so we've got those trusted relationships with everybody that engages with the project. But similarly, we also have a vocational training framework we call offer for our accredited training. And we also have a network of other agencies that we called our Joined Up for Jobs network that we bring in. We very much seamlessly try to knit everything together in the background, hide the wiring from the actual client. They don't need to know this is this project, this is that project. They need to get their service delivered. So if somebody's needing welfare advice, we've got specialists for that. If somebody's got housing issues, we've got specialists we can draw on from that side of it. But, and I don't know if this is what the question was alluding to, we have a service standard charter. And it's it's a really good piece of work. So everybody we fund or we engage with signs up to that charter, so that, and we also review it collectively together. So we have an understanding of care and responsibility towards any client group, and that no wrong door approach. Doesn't matter what door somebody comes through, they get a quality service from us, and have a consistency of service as well. So, and most of our service provider is in the third sector, which is why we've got such deep engagement into those harder to help communities.
Right, so focus on the voluntary and third sector there, and standards. Bill, from in Devon.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're very similar actually. So, I mean, we're using, because of the partners we've got, we're using the Housing Association capacity and actually their community-led infrastructure that they've got already. And so in some ways, we've got that first step in that there's the whole tenant engagement piece. And then we're bringing in the county council, NCS, and some of that other organisational capacity into that network, and using some of our expert capacity around careers advice and guidance, around advisors, around training, including some of the training projects that we're doing with the colleges and in-house at the moment, as well as with training providers, to reach some of those individuals. And it's that whole thing about it being seamless for the individual. You don't see the wiring, people just turn up. But actually behind the scenes, we're doing a very similar thing. It's a partnership mechanism of probably about 15 organisations working together, from VCS right the way up to nationals, making sure that we can tailor it to that one individual. Yeah.
Exactly right. So the people won't go, oh, I'm part of the New Futures pilot. They will just receive the the support that they need, and the pilot itself is trying to do some of that joining up. So next question is more sort of taking a step back, I guess. What would the panel like to see from central government policy to help with the local upskilling agenda? So how could central government help? I'm going to turn to Emily first. Emily, do you want to have share your thoughts on that one?
Yeah.
And if anyone else wants to jump in, then put your hand up.
I think I'll start with what we'd like to see at a national level for national policy, but then also thinking about how that filters down at the local level. I think one of the things that's really struck us as we have done the scoping work for the pilots and then engaged with the local areas as well, is just how siloed skills and employment policy are. And we already knew this, but I think kind of working in the local areas has really highlighted this to us. So we are not, through New Futures, just trying to run a training programme, but we also are not only looking at supporting people into a job. We're trying to connect the two, and we're trying to specifically look at career change. And that has been really tricky, and that is a lot to do with the siloed nature of policy making, and then that filters down because it affects funding, and then when you look at a local level, then that's how the local infrastructure is shaped as well. So I think if we're looking at a local level, we need that national policy to be more joined up, to allow to really kind of break down those barriers, and we're hoping to challenge some of that orthodoxy in our pilots. I think at a local level, we do need some local decision making in terms of how the money gets spent, what kind of provision is needed, because the local labour markets, as we talked about earlier, look so different. And so we need kind of the national policy to allow for that at a local level as well.
Yeah, we'll certainly be doing that, and we're engaging all the way through this project with those national structures to share what we're learning. Phil, you've all got your hands up, but Phil, you were the first. You are the first in there, I have to say, so I'm going to come to you first.
Great. If you'd have asked me an hour ago, as a county in one of the English regions, I would have said we could do with some kind of devolution policy that would allow us to devolve skills and employment down to the very local level and look at some kind of levelling up. But I understand a paper's been released in the last hour that's set out, so I need to go and read what we've actually been offered. I mean, I think Emily's absolutely right. More control and more ability to tailor at that very local level. Our biggest challenge often is that we get national programmes that don't fit with a local scenario. They meet the needs of Whitehall, or they meet the needs of the bigger cities. They don't meet the needs of our big coastal settlements, or our community in the centre of Dartmoor. How do we make it flex? So the more local tailoring we can do, the better. And I think the more control we've got, the better we are.
Yeah, and hopefully as we go through these pilots, we'll be able to bring that learning together and share that. I'm going to go across the row, and Sinead, you're next on my screen.
Yes, so it was very interesting when before Emily spoke, I thought Northern Ireland's so unique. It's not like the rest of the UK. And then Emily spoke and I thought, oh, we're not unique at all. So it fascinates me within government, right? So employability and skills sit in two separate departments and they don't necessarily talk to each other. Wow. So anyway, how can you solve kind of key issues in your city? The big positive thing that we have, and I know I kind of mentioned it, was, and it's through the main government departments who have responsibility, that and local authorities kind of manage the whole process. So we have every local authority now in Northern Ireland has a labour market partnership, and that's actually a way to, within at a very local level, these are our challenges. So we do our own strategic assessment of the city in terms of supply, demand, and we're looking to set up an observatory to give us the intelligence to be able to do that. So supply, demand, policy and provision. And we're hoping that will be able to really look at, well, what are the key challenges at any point in time within Belfast. So yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great perspective for us to build in. And Rayner, last but not least.
I just had something maybe slightly different, because I agree absolutely with Phil and Sinead and their perspective on that. What I've loved so far about this project, amongst a number of things, is it's allowed us to come together conversations with the rest of the UK and to learn from each other and speak to each other. What I'd like from central government, I would like to see some larger national targets that we can get behind collectively. Devolved budgets are great, it's given us more local powers, but sometimes I think that then that gets lost in that. And I would like to see what the local work we're doing, how does it contribute to national strategy to improve conditions? And that, like Angela, Rayner were saying, that equity that we need, which is what levelling up is. Right, well, what are we trying to achieve? And can somebody measure it? And, you know, I think more demands, we need to put more demands on ourselves and on government to achieve more.
There may be a few metrics that we need to look through that have been published this afternoon that will, you know, we can build into the work that we're doing. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question if you posed it, but I think we've had a brilliant selection of questions from the practical to the political and everything in between. It only leaves me to thank hugely our panel of speakers, Rayner, Phil, Sinead. Absolutely brilliant to hear from you this afternoon. Emily, thank you very much for setting out the context and the presentation. I do hope that everybody who's interested will contact Emily, and her inbox will be deluged by all of your requests and points. And also a big thank you to Angela Rayner, MP, who joined us this afternoon. Lastly, thank you to you for joining us as well and for your brilliant questions. It's been fantastic to share with you from this launch point onwards what we're doing with this project for New Futures, and we look forward to you joining us for our future events as well. So have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.